Ukraine's Air Force isn't just trying to survive anymore. It's trying to build for the 2030s and beyond. And the aircraft they've chosen to bet big on isn't American or French. It's Swedish. Last month, President Volodymyr Zelensky dropped a headline that turned heads across Europe. Ukraine plans to acquire as many as 150 Saab JAS-39 Gripens. The announcement didn't come out of thin air. It came after months of internal debate, NATO consultations, and a growing realization that the war has shifted from improvisation to endurance. Unlike most Western fighters handed over by NATO partners, the Gripen was literally engineered for the kind of dispersed, mobile air operations Ukraine is running today. Jets that can land on public roads, refuel, rearm, and take off again before Russian drones or missiles can lock on. The Swedes built this jet during the Cold War with a single goal: keep flying when everything else is burning. The newer Gripen variants also pack more advanced radar, stronger electronic warfare suites, and the ability to launch longer-range missiles than the Soviet-era MiGs and Sukhois, still flying in Ukrainian colors. Even compared to the F-16s and Mirage 2000s recently donated by Western allies, the Gripen gives Kyiv tools it's never had before. But no matter how good the specs look on paper, experts are clear about one thing: the jet alone won't hand Ukraine control of the skies overnight. I'm Conley, and today we're digging into why Ukraine's new Swedish fighters matter, and what they can and can't do in one of the most brutal air wars of the modern era. Like the battles raging across the ground, the air war over Ukraine has turned into a slow-motion war of attrition. Both sides are now so saturated with surface-to-air systems that neither can sustain full air superiority. Most missions happen at distance: missiles, glide bombs, drones, and intercepts, rather than classic dogfights. To understand what difference the Gripen might make, analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, a respected London-based defense think tank, have been tracking every phase of the aerial campaign. One of their senior fellows, Justin Bronk, summed it up neatly when he spoke with our team. The main danger Ukraine faces from Russian aviation, he said, comes from the hundreds of glide bombs dropped each week from Su-34 and Su-35 aircraft. Those bombs glide up to 45 miles, and some new variants with small jet engines reportedly stretch to 124 miles. That means Russian pilots can release them far behind their own lines, well outside the range of Ukraine's air defense missiles, while still slamming military depots and apartment blocks hundreds of miles away. Ukraine has tried to hit back with glide bombs of its own, but its scale is nowhere near what Moscow can throw. Before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine fielded roughly 100 fighter jets, mostly MiG-29s and Su-27s, relics of the Soviet era. In the 3 years since, they've lost about 90 aircraft, according to the open-source research group Oryx. Yet somehow the Ukrainian Air Force has stayed alive, thanks largely to spare parts, rebuilds, and the generosity of partners who kept sending anything that could still fly. Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Norway have together pledged more than 40 F-16s, with roughly the same number still to come. France has agreed to send up to 20 Mirage 2000s, several of which are already flying combat sorties. Both aircraft lines are proven fourth-generation Western designs with radars far superior to the MiGs, giving Ukrainian pilots a real shot at spotting cruise missiles and drones that would otherwise sneak through. Those F-16s and Mirages also carry better radar warning receivers, systems that light up the cockpit when an enemy radar locks on, giving the pilot precious seconds to evade. They've already proved invaluable defending cities and power grids against missile and drone swarms. The F-16s, in particular, have started flying limited ground attack and reconnaissance missions, carrying electronic warfare pods and precision munitions to disrupt Russian logistics. Still, these are older airframes. Most date from the 1980s or 1990s, which is why Kiev is so eager for something newer. Something built for the kind of war they're actually fighting, not the one NATO designed for 30 years ago. President Zelensky told reporters that he expects the first Gripen deliveries in 2026, most likely the CD variants, second-hand, but still highly capable. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson added that building brand-new EF models would take about 3 years, putting their arrival closer to 2029. Considering how complex modern fighters are, that's actually fast. And Saab is already ramping up production to meet orders from Brazil, Thailand, and Sweden's own Air Force. Zelensky's broader vision is ambitious. A future fleet of around 250 fighters, including Gripens, newer F-16s, and French Rafales. But the Gripen would form the backbone, for reasons that go beyond price or politics. When Saab began designing the aircraft back in the late 1970s, Sweden was staring across the Baltic at the Soviet Union. They knew that if war ever broke out, their airfields would be among the first targets. So they built a jet that could operate from highways and hidden road strips, serviced by small teams of conscripts instead of massive airbase crews. That concept, dispersed operations, has now become the very strategy keeping Ukraine's Air Force alive. Even the U.S. Air Force has started training similar tactics with F-35s and A-10s, testing quick turnarounds from improvised runways and civilian airports. Sweden was just 4 decades ahead of everyone else. The Gripen's designers prioritized simplicity, low operating cost, and plug-and-play technology. They knew their maintainers might be 19-year-old conscripts, not seasoned technicians. So every system was built to be accessible, teachable, and forgiving. One small but brilliant design choice: the service panels. On most jets, you need a wrench or power tool to reach fuel lines, batteries, or avionics bays. On the Gripen, many panels pop open with a button push, even with thick gloves on in the middle of a Swedish winter. The whole jet sits low enough that mechanics can reach most components without a ladder. Saab says even a full engine swap can be done in about an hour, less than the time it takes just to remove an F-16's engine. And because everything fits inside a 20-foot shipping container, a mobile maintenance team can haul parts, tools, and fuel anywhere a truck can drive. For Ukraine, where bases are constantly shifting to dodge missile attacks, that kind of mobility is priceless. Of course, nothing comes free. The Gripen's rugged landing gear, built to handle rough roadways, adds weight. More weight means shorter range and slightly slower acceleration compared to sleeker fighters like the F-16. But in return, you get survivability and independence, 2 things Ukraine values above all else. The philosophy fits Ukraine perfectly. The country is now teaching entire squadrons to leapfrog from one highway to another, supported by mobile convoys of trucks carrying munitions, spare parts, and fuel bladders. In July, a report from the war zone described a 10-truck convoy acting as a mini airbase for F-16s, 1 vehicle for command and communications, another for weapons, even a sleeper trailer for the crews. It's like a rock band on tour, minus the groupies. At the Air and Space Forces Association Symposium this March, General James B. Hecker, then commander of U.S. Air Forces in Europe, explained how Ukrainian pilots were keeping their jets alive. "We never take off and land at the same airfield," their commander told him. "Constant movement means survival." The difference is that the F-16 and Mirage weren't designed for this. The Gripen was. Its maintenance simplicity, its road-ready gear, its built-in logistics all make dispersed ops easier, safer, and faster. And Ukraine already has a head start. Sweden began training Ukrainian pilots and ground crews in 2023, so the learning curve won't be starting from zero. When those jets finally carry Ukrainian flags and tail numbers, their most important upgrade won't even be the airframe. It'll be the missile slung beneath the wings, the Meteor. Developed jointly by the UK, Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and Sweden, the Meteor is Europe's crown jewel radar-guided air-to-air weapon, capable of striking targets far beyond the reach of anything Ukraine currently fields. For the first time, Ukrainian pilots could challenge Russian fighters patrolling deep behind their own lines. The Su-34s and Su-35s that have been launching glide bombs with near impunity. Bronk explained that pilots would likely fly low to avoid Russian radars, then pop up just long enough to fire. Denser air at low altitude saps missile range, so you need a weapon with serious energy to climb out and still hit. The Meteor provides that, powered by a throttleable ramjet that keeps pushing through the entire flight instead of coasting like a rocket. As Bronk put it, it's like hitting baseballs in Coors Field, where the air is thin and every swing goes further. Except here, the opposite applies. Thick air means drag, and you need a monster bat to get the distance. The Meteor is that bat. If Ukraine does get clearance to use it, the missile could push Russian patrols dozens of miles back, giving Ukrainian strike aircraft more breathing room near the front. But there's a catch, a political one. Because 6 nations co-developed the Meteor, all 6 must approve any export. And European leaders worry that if one missile were ever captured intact, Russia could dissect it, analyze its electronics, and develop countermeasures or clones. That's a genuine risk. Even without the Meteor, the Gripen's CD variants offer newer radar and electronic warfare tech than Ukraine's existing fleet. The advanced E model goes further, carrying an AESA radar, active electronically scanned array, giving pilots higher resolution, longer detection range, and the ability to track multiple targets simultaneously. It's a true multi-role fighter. It can mount Sidewinders, AMRAAMs, JDAMs, Mavericks, and small-diameter bombs, depending on the mission. That flexibility is exactly what Ukraine needs. A jet that can swap roles overnight between intercepting missiles and striking ground targets. Still, even the best hardware can't erase the fundamentals of this war. Neither the Gripen CD nor the newer E will magically flip air superiority. Ukraine has done a remarkable job degrading Russian air defenses and striking deep into logistics hubs with drones and cruise missiles, forcing Russia to stretch its protective net wider. But the Russian military still has too many surface-to-air systems to dismantle completely. As Bronk noted, even the U.S. Air Force, with stealth jets, F-22 instructors, and full-spectrum support, would struggle to dominate an environment that dense. That's why America has shifted toward the concept of pulsed air power, seizing temporary control of the skies in specific areas rather than permanent dominance everywhere. Ukraine may have to think the same way, fight for pockets of control, use them for strikes, then fade before Russian missiles catch up. So even if all 150 Gripen Es rolled into Ukrainian hangars tomorrow, total air superiority would still be out of reach. What they would bring is endurance, easier maintenance, faster turnaround, better sensors, and weapons that make life miserable for Russian crews. The bigger question is time. Can Ukraine hold on long enough to receive those Gripens in meaningful numbers? The first second-hand models might arrive in 2026, But the truly modern EF variants are 3 years away. In war, that's an eternity. Bronk's answer was blunt. That depends on us. On the United States and Europe continuing to send weapons, ammo, and funding. Without that, no jet, no matter how capable, will matter. And that's where we'll pick up in Part 2. What happens if the support slows? And how Ukraine's bet on a Swedish jet could reshape the future of European air power. Ukraine's decision to buy the Swedish Gripen isn't only about getting new airplanes. It's about reshaping how the country, and maybe all of Europe, fights a modern war. While the first part of this story dealt with the hardware, this next chapter looks at the long game: strategy, industry, and endurance. People keep asking why Kiev doesn't just rely entirely on the F-16s coming from the West. The answer is simple. The F-16 is a phenomenal jet, but it's a child of a different world, built for long, secure runways, spacious hangars, and deep logistical support. You can't just pull it off a highway and expect it to operate after a missile strike. The Gripen, on the other hand, was built for that exact chaos. It can refuel beside a fuel truck, take off from a frozen road, and be serviced by a handful of conscripts in parkas. It is, in every sense, a survivor's jet, and that's precisely why Ukraine wants it. Within NATO circles, there's a growing realization that this Swedish approach to dispersed operations isn't a niche tactic anymore. It's the future. The United States calls its version Agile Combat Employment, or ACE, and even America's stealth fighters have started practicing the same kind of hop-and-go mobility that Sweden perfected decades ago. Ukraine, by necessity, has become the live-fire test case for that doctrine, and every lesson it learns will ripple through Western air forces for years to come. The industrial side of this story is equally revealing. Saab, the company behind the Gripen, is not Lockheed Martin. It doesn't crank out hundreds of aircraft a year. It crafts them like precision instruments. Right now, the production line in Linköping, Sweden, builds only a few jets annually. Meeting an order of 150 for Ukraine means tripling that pace. To do it, subcontractors across Sweden, Brazil, and South Africa will have to ramp up, and that will create both jobs and political friction. Swedish lawmakers already debate how many jets they can afford to divert abroad without leaving gaps in their own defenses. The likely compromise is pragmatic. Send refurbished C and D models first, aircraft retired from Swedish service but upgraded with modern avionics, while the brand new E and F variants roll out between 2028 and 2029. That timeline keeps Sweden's air force intact and gives Ukraine real capability within the next few years, not the next decade. But airplanes are useless without people who can fly and fix them. Training is now the true bottleneck. Sweden began instructing Ukrainian pilots and maintainers in 2023, but scaling that effort is an enormous challenge. Each pilot needs roughly a year of conversion training, plus English communication courses to meet NATO standards. Ground crews take 6 months just to master Saab's maintenance routines. That may sound slow, yet it's faster than the F-16 pipeline, largely because the Gripen's design is so intuitive. Its onboard diagnostic system runs automated checks and prints digital maintenance logs before the jet even shuts down. For crews that have spent years wrenching on aging MiGs, that's like stepping from a Soviet-era Lada into a Tesla. The goal is to field at least 4 operational Gripen squadrons, about 60 aircraft, by 2028. Achieving that will demand uninterrupted funding, spare parts shipments, and relentless training rotations through Swedish and Czech bases. Then there's the Meteor missile, the crown jewel of the package and the most controversial piece of all. If approved for export, It would mark the first time Europe's premier radar-guided air-to-air weapon enters an active war. 6 nations, the UK, Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and Sweden, must sign off unanimously. And unanimity is hard when a single dud missile falling intact on Russian soil could reveal its secrets. Engineers fear reverse engineering. Diplomats fear escalation. Yet without it, Ukrainian pilots will remain outranged by Russian Su-35s armed with R-37Ms that can strike from more than 120 miles away. European defense officials have floated a middle path: deliver a limited batch of Meteors with safeguarded software, or keep the missiles under Swedish technical supervision inside Ukraine. Even a partial deployment would change Russian behavior overnight. Those long-range patrols that now orbit safely behind Russian lines would be forced to pull back, creating breathing room for Ukrainian strike aircraft near the front. Modern air combat is often about psychology as much as physics. Making your opponent doubt his safety zone is half the victory. Behind all this technology lies politics. For Sweden, selling Gripens to a country under invasion is both an industrial leap and a moral statement. A small neutral nation fully aligning with NATO after generations of standing apart. For Ukraine, it's proof that Europe still believes in its survival, not just its resistance. And for Washington, the deal carries mixed emotions. On one hand, it relieves some burden from U.S. taxpayers and manufacturers. On the other, it signals that European nations can chart their own procurement paths. The Pentagon officially praises the decision, but many insiders quietly note that every Gripen sold in place of an American jet slightly erodes America's defense industrial influence. Still, geopolitically, the move makes sense. Europe's terrain, weather, and infrastructure are tailor-made for the Swedish approach: rugged, flexible, road-based air power instead of massive centralized bases. In the long run, self-sufficiency is not defiance, it's insurance. Ukraine is buying that insurance in the form of 150 small, lethal Swedish machines. Out on the front lines, the reality is grimmer. Pilots still strap into patched-up MiG-29s held together by borrowed parts and improvisation. They take off from cracked runways, dodge drones on ascent, and sometimes never come back. Each mission is a gamble. When they hear about the Gripen's ease of maintenance or the comfort of its cockpit, it feels almost surreal. One Ukrainian flyer put it simply, "With the Gripen, we might finally plan instead of react." That's the heart of it: predictability. Modern jets aren't just faster or deadlier, they make operations routine again. After years of improvising under fire, routine becomes a luxury. Saab's designers built that reliability into everything from the widescreen cockpit displays to the automatic flight control systems that steady the jet in turbulence. When your entire country is a war zone, small design details translate directly into survival. Cost matters too. A new Gripen E runs around $60 to $70 million, roughly half the sticker price of an F-35, and its operating cost is barely a fraction of that of American fighters. About $5,000 per flight hour versus $25,000 for an F-16 and more than $35,000 for an F-35. Fuel efficiency, quick engine swaps, and minimal ground crew requirements make it sustainable even under economic siege. Saab likes to point out that a 6-person team can refuel, rearm, and relaunch a Gripen in 10 minutes. That isn't marketing spin. Swedish squadrons do it every winter during road-based drills. For Ukraine, it means a jet that can stay in the fight day after day without collapsing under its own logistics. A crucial advantage in a war where attrition kills as many machines as missiles do. The ripple effects extend beyond Ukraine. Within NATO, the deal cements a deeper European industrial base, one less dependent on American exports. For Russia, it adds another layer of complexity to an already stretched air defense map. Analysts have begun comparing this moment to the late Cold War adoption of the F-16, which unified Western air fleets. The Gripen could play that same role for Europe's 2030s, cheaper than the F-35, easier to maintain, interoperable across nations, and politically neutral enough to satisfy multiple governments. Saab has already pitched similar sales to Poland, the Czech Republic, and the Baltic states. If even a few of those move forward, Northern Europe could form a Gripen corridor from the Arctic to the Black Sea, creating the most agile regional air defense network on Earth. Still, none of it matters without continued Western willpower. Funding pipelines shift with elections. Public attention drifts. If aid falters, no jet, no matter how advanced, will change the outcome. Justin Bronk of Russi said it bluntly. The hardware is the easy part. The commitment is the hard part. That commitment isn't just money. It's political stamina to sustain training, munitions, and spare parts for years after the headlines fade. It's remembering that endurance wins wars, not press releases. Looking ahead, the calendar feels both short and endless. If schedules hold, refurbished C and D models begin arriving in 2026, with steady deliveries through 2028. The brand new E and F variants follow in 2029, carrying the AESA radar and advanced electronic warfare suite that make them among the best non-stealth fighters on Earth. Piece by piece, sortie by sortie, Ukraine's Air Force will evolve from a patchwork of borrowed machines into a cohesive hybrid fleet, Eastern airframes blended with Western brains. Each new pilot trained in Sweden, each engine shipped from Linköping, adds a small thread to that transformation. Someday, when the skies over Ukraine are quieter, historians will look back and see that transformation as more than a procurement deal. They'll see it as the moment Europe rediscovered its ability to defend itself collectively. The Gripen's story is one of endurance, adaptation, and faith in engineering born from necessity. It's about a country that refused to give up and a continent learning to stand on its own wings. The same roads that once carried refugees might soon serve as runways. The same cold that froze battlefields in winter will test the tires of Swedish jets taking off to defend free airspace. In the end, that's the real power of the Gripen. Not stealth, not speed, endurance. A design that understands war isn't won by perfection, but by persistence. And for Ukraine, persistence is survival. The Gripen won't win the war in a single sortie, but it might ensure that Ukraine still has pilots, aircraft, and hope when the final sortie is flown. And maybe that's the quiet miracle everyone's been waiting for. A small jet, built for cold roads and long odds, keeping a nation's sky alive.